Now, when millionaire businessman Scott Gilmore returned to New Zealand after 12 years in the US, he wanted to do something to lift the achievement of children from poor homes. He'd seen an American initiative called the I Have a Dream program, where wealthy sponsors adopt an entire class of children and offer them mentoring and extra tuition. Not only were dropout rates reduced, academic results also vastly improved. So nearly 10 years ago, Scott Gilmore started the program at Wesley Primary in Auckland. We'll speak to him in just a moment. But first, Janae Tibshraeny met some of his dreamers.
It's after school on a Tuesday afternoon. Lessons are over, but this 17-year-old is getting ready to go back into the classroom here at Scott Gilmore's Dreamers Centre in Mount Roskill.
My name is Anna Moala. I love sports and my dream is to be a teacher.
But school has sometimes taken second place for Anna. Usual teenage pressures, coupled with the fact that she's one of 8 kids from a poor family, has made studying hard.
I would babysit my niece and I couldn't go to school because she wouldn't settle with my mum. She'd only settle with me. And then it's like, it would be hard for me to go to school because she would cry, like for me to stay home with her. And like just having kids around, there's no quietness for me to do homework. It's really hard to concentrate.
But unlike most kids with Anna's background, she's had some help to get her through. She's been coached and mentored through her schooling here at the Dreamers Centre. Back in 2003, Anna Moala was part of a group of 53 children, an entire year at Auckland's Wesley Primary, who were adopted by IT millionaire Scott Gilmore.
And what don't you do in here? You don't okay.
This select group at a Decile 1 primary school were offered extra tutoring, mentor support, as well as the chance to experience a wide range of activities their parents probably couldn't afford. He also gave each child a computer for their home. In return, he asked them to do their part, to work hard and try to reach their goals. And if they made it through school, he promised to pay for their tertiary studies.
Stay in school, study hard, succeed and get off to university.
Anthony Backhouse has managed the Dreamers Centre from day one.
Well, the first thing is we're making sure they've got a plan. First thing, a long-term plan, what do you want to be? And, you know, what are the steps to get there? The second thing is academic mentoring and advocacy, breaking that down, small steps, you know, what are the steps to get there, helping them out with that along the way, advocating between their teachers, their schools, their families. You know, we work strongly with their families and with the students themselves, making sure that everyone understands that plan. The third part is resourcing it.
Most of the kids on the Dreamers program come from Pacific Island families. It's a group that does not do well in education figures. Last year, 52% of Pacific Island candidates gained NCEA Level 3, compared to 61% of Māori, 78% of Asian, and 79% of New Zealand European candidates. Back in 2007, young Jade Nicholas was grateful for being given the chance to study beyond school one day.
I would like to do it because not only I'm lucky it's my mum and my dad that's lucky because they wouldn't have to worry about anything.
Hi, I'm Jade Nicholas. I love being creative and I have a dream to finish school and work with people.
The Dreamers program has supported Jade through some tough times, including the death of her mother.
They've supported me so much throughout that, hard time in my life and helped me work to the best of my abilities, and not only for myself but for my families. Without them, I don't know where I would be.
The control group for this project shows exactly where the Dreamers could be today. The year level above the Dreamers at Wesley Primary didn't receive any special treatment. Of the 20 who stayed at high school, only 1 achieved university entrance and 1 passed NCEA Level 3.
Hey girls! Hi! See ya!
It's a different story for the Dreamers. Of the 31 who are still connected to the program, 12 look likely to achieve university entrance this year, and another 10 NCEA Level 3.
You were trying to get a higher mark than achieved, eh? Yeah.
Anthony Backhouse, or Coach Ant, has pushed them all the way.
I hated school. I never really went until Coach pushed me. He came to my house pretty much every day. Even if I wouldn't answer the door, he'd know I was home. He would just stand there and wait till I open the door. He would text me and he'll be like, I know you're inside. And he would wait for me to put my uniform on and go to school. Like, he would drive me to school himself. He would make sure all my grades were up. He always made sure I was here.
It's been a massive commitment, but Scott Gilmore has never confirmed what the project has cost. For Anna, the investment has been invaluable.
Now that I'm at a positive place with the new beginning and everything, I feel like that I can achieve my dream. Like, I can become a teacher because he's pushed me so hard, and I just can't give up like that. Like, I know I can do it.
Zealands TV3 reporting. After the break, Scott Gilmore talks about getting better results out of the kids at our low decile schools. And later, TV comedian Jeremy Wells makes a pitch for a new home for Auckland Test cricket. You're back with The Nation, and I'm joined in the studio by Scott Gilmore, the sponsor of the I Have a Dream program, which began at Wesley Primary. Welcome to the program, Scott.
Thanks, Rachel.
We saw just before the commercial break a report that showed what your program does. What we don't know is who you are and how you came to fund this program.
It's the least interesting story, actually. Look, I grew up in Invercargill. Typical middle-class family, you know, great parents, great school, great health system that we had back in New Zealand in the 60s and 70s. Did a BCom at Otago, got into selling computers, went away to the States, followed a young American girl there, and started a software company after I'd done an MBA over there. And I learned about this I Have a Dream program when I was living in Oregon, and I just cut out this article because it just resonated for some reason. I thought, that sounds neat. And, you know, it was bringing opportunities to kids that I saw didn't have those opportunities in the States, and I'd had growing up. And then when I came home in '97, a few years later, we sold our software company, and I thought, looked around and I thought there's a need here as well. So I called up the folks in New York and they said, yep, we'll support you.
That's interesting because it's quite a transition from cutting a clipping out of a newspaper to thinking it could be implemented here.
Yeah.
And was the trigger what? You saw that children weren't achieving what they could achieve?
Well, look, you just have to read the daily paper and watch the television news to see that there's some dysfunctional aspects of society. Why is that? You know, no kid is born bad. But if they lack a chance of a good education, if they don't have a solid family life, if the parents are English second language speakers, you know, there's a lot of issues that prevent a kid from succeeding in school. And so you can see those issues and you can see the outcome when it happens. So, you know, New Zealand has over 85,000 what they call NEETs, which is youth that are not in education, employment or training. The dysfunction of that is catastrophic and costly to society.
Tell me about this phenomena that you say occurs in lower decile schools, and I just want to get the wording right here. You call it the soft racism of lower expectations.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Look, we've had a number of examples with our Dreamers specifically, and I've seen it elsewhere, where the schools were actually taking some of these Pacifica and Maori kids and pushing them into lower tracks, less academic tracks, not university approved tracks. So as early as year 11, the old fifth form, these kids were basically pathwayed out of ever going to university, doing a tourism or a low skills English or low skills maths class, not university approved. And we were going in and advocating on behalf of our kids so they could take this because they had dreams to be, you know, we've got one kid who wants to be a history professor. And last year, he was told by his school, he's taken a bunch of 10 kids, all Pacifica, and told to go to an alternative education sports course. And he came back to coach and said, why was I in that group, coach? And Ant went in and advocated on his behalf. This year, he's doing year 13, 5 university approved subjects. So
is this because is this an issue of timetables, or is this just an issue of almost social engineering by default?
Well, actually, I don't want to go that far. I mean, sometimes I get very angry about it, and I do think that. I think also there are some issues. You know, teachers, it's a tough job teaching. Let's also state, New Zealand has a great education system. You know, 80% of our kids do extremely well because they're coming from probably good homes that are well resourced, have books, you know, trips and so on. English is a primary language, and they go to schools that are serving the needs well. And New Zealand does consistently well on the PISA standards, you know, the Program for International Student Assessment. We're always in the top 6 of reading, writing and science, and have been for a decade. So New Zealand school system, absolutely fantastic. Except
for some.
There's about 10 to 20% that are not succeeding in school. They typically come from low decile schools, so issues of social deprivation. They also come primarily, or not primarily, but largely from Maori and Pacifica ethnicity, because those are the families that are in these low decile schools. And that's a worry for New Zealand. It's a waste of human resource, it's costly to society, and it's not fair to these kids.
There is, it seems, a growing divide in New Zealand between the rich and the poor, and we have many parents working very long hours and very labour-intensive jobs for the minimum wage. We had a documentary that screened on this channel before the election last year, which looked at child poverty. What impact do all of these factors have on a child's education and future prospects?
Look, I've been doing increasing amounts of reading and research in this space, and there's a wealth of data out there, and this is not new news, right? This is patently obvious to anybody who looks at it. There's a TEDx speech on our website, or if you go to TEDx Auckland, Google that. I did a 20-minute speech on all these issues of social deprivation and how they're manifested in a family's life. And it's not bad faith on the family's part, but if you come from Samoa or Tonga, you don't have English as a primary language, you're working. Often these families are working more than full time. They're doing 2 jobs to put food on the table. So when is the time to go to a parent-teacher meeting and so on? So there's a multitude of issues, and I guess it's annoying when you hear talkback radio saying, oh, it's the parents or it's the school. Well, I say, every time you point the finger at somebody, 3 fingers are pointing back at you. What are you going to do about it? And that's where we get to this concept of it takes a village to raise a child.
And that's how, I guess, in theory, you fix it. But is that feasible? I mean, it's not just a case of raising the minimum wage so that parents earn more money so they can, in theory, work a little less. That's not going to fix it at all either, is it? You say it's this village approach. So what does someone who's watching this right now, who may not have a child at school, how do they contribute to this?
I welcome the chance to come on TV, because every time we do, we get the phone starts ringing with people wanting to volunteer, and we've had, and that's why our program has been successful. It's not me with this idea; it's the fact that I have Ant Backhouse and Lynn Sewer, 2 full-time staff who work so hard and so diligently on this program and support these kids in every way. And we have hundreds of volunteers that come and do tutoring after school, long-term mentoring, and so on. And what Ant and Lynn and I are talking about now is how do we take what we've learned over these 10 years and roll it out on a broader scale. We've paid a lot of money every year to have a research report this thick done, which analyses our program and unpicks the success factors. And we are now sitting down and saying, how do we take this and put it into other low decile schools? And you look at, you've got schools that empty after 3 p.m, so the facilities are available. In every community, there's hundreds of volunteers that would love to get involved in helping kids learn how to read or develop woodworking skills or do their homework or whatever. And if we can corral those resources and then hire somebody like Ant and Lynn for every sort of 50 to 100 kids, we can turn around all of these dysfunctional elements in society.
So what you're saying is this isn't a political issue, this is a national issue.
Look, the analysis is Christchurch earthquake. Look what happened in terms of the student army, people donating, the crisis of the shattered buildings gets action. We have a crisis here of shattered lives, of lives that actually aren't being formed right from the get-go. We need to act on that crisis, otherwise it will be a crisis for us all in a society. By the year 2050, over 50% of kids born in New Zealand will be Maori and Pacific ethnicity. If we continue with these educational outcomes, we're not a knowledge economy, we're not going to catch up Australia, we're not going to do a lot of things.
If I was to give you the education portfolio right now and make you Minister for Education...
I'd run away.
But what would be the first thing, the priority, do you think, step 1, to help our children now? What would you implement?
How long have we got to go? No, look, I think something like this is paramount, and it's not across all of New Zealand. It's let's go to the high needs situations. And you have a report here, Improving the Transition, by Sir Peter Gluckman, that was done for the Prime Minister a couple of years ago. He identifies all these issues. So people have done this. You had Dale Williams, the Mayor of Otaronga, on the show in May. He talked about the issue. So let's just actually stop talking about it and get doing it. Organise schools so they have longer school days, so it does stay open for after-school assistance, so that kids aren't going home to be latchkey kids, that they are getting literacy skills built up right from the get-go, because when we started our program in year 4, some of our kids were 3 years behind their chronological age in terms of reading. Now that's not the fault of the parents. If you're English second language, working full-time, or this family breakdown, when do you do it? The
government's mooted this idea of charter schools. Where do you sit on that?
I think that's another experiment. There's some upsides to charter schools, but where they've been necessary in the States is because you've got a widely dysfunctional education system and huge disparities. We're going that way, but I don't think we're there yet. So, you know, the charter school energy, I think, could be redirected to something more productive.
All right. Scott Gilmore, very much appreciate your time. I think what you're doing is pretty extraordinary. Thank
Thanks,
you for
Rachel.
coming in.